This is Tim,
And Mulele.
and this is Critiquing Comics. Welcome to Critiquing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo with Mulele on Skype. How are you doing?
Good, man, but I'm a little confused. I thought we were doing Tim Catches Up with the MCU.
No.
Okay, so we're not reviewing Infinity War this time?
No, not yet.
Okay. What are we doing?
We're reading Amazing Tales issues 2 and 3 from David Dye. So back in Critiquing Comics 165, a couple months ago, we talked about the first issue, and David, we liked it, and so David was nice enough to send us the next two.
Yeah, actually, I remember it quite well, and I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in these two issues, he wrote, I think it was in the front of number 3, about how he preferred to sort of do a wider variety of types of stories in the book, but for reasons of, I guess, speed of how long it takes to get it done when he does that, he decided to mostly focus on his sort of Space Patrol title, Dropship 15, in both of these. There are a couple other stories, but it's actually both issues have kind of a short one and done Dropship 15 story, and then there's another story that continues from one issue to the other.
Yeah.
So, and this time, they're color. The first issue was black and white, but these are both in color.
Yeah.
So, how are you feeling about these two?
I've got issues.
Okay.
How about you?
Well, I did kind of miss the wider variety, and we talked about how the more kind of historical type stories, his art style kind of went up a notch on those.
Yeah.
The detail and such. These are, it's all fiction, all clearly fictional stories, and they're fine. Although, boy, I don't know, that one story, Tar Pits of Doom, that really threw me in issue 2. I mean, it's so not safe for work.
Yeah.
And yet he's kind of holding back on the language.
Yeah.
And, using FLICK instead of the other word that it would look like in certain typefaces.
Yeah.
So you got a naked guy who's rescued by 2 women from a group of female warriors who are running around in next to nothing. And some of them end up sliced into 2 pieces.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I won't spoil the twist, but the twist was kind of cringy.
A little bit, but I was kind of wondering what exactly is going on in this world. Because it has kind of a Y the Last Man vibe to it.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And I was just kind of wondering what chemicals he was using when he came up with the story.
Only the finest chemicals.
Because it was so kind of off in a completely different direction from pretty much everything else of his that we've read.
Yeah.
But anyway, what were your issues?
My issue, or I should say my biggest issue, I'm trying to find the start of the story here. Obscene Threat.
Okay. Yeah, that's the first part of that continued story that goes on into the next issue.
Yeah, I found it to be a little bit, how can I put it, RAF.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for those unfamiliar with the term, racist as fuck.
Mm-hmm.
In that you've got a bunch of simians that have kind of come to Earth, and then they tried to branch off, and now they've come to Mars and have a hideout, but seem to all be wearing kind of Arab-based costumes.
Yeah.
And in the first issue, it's kind of monochromatic. They're all in green or all in I think orange in some parts. Maybe outside is kind of red and inside is kind of green. Inside the base, just like one or two shots of photographs where we see what they look like. Look like humans with kind of a big space between their nose and their mouths. But it's just completely Arab or Muslim garb. And yeah, it was kind of cringy at that point. Because if you look up terrorist or you look up ISIS, you see a lot of similar imagery, minus the simians.
Yeah.
In issue 3, it's actually the story's continued, and this time the simians are green. Their skin is green, and it's not monochromatic, and so there seems to have been a little bit of a change up here. And it's not as cringy, but it's still kind of the same ideology, somewhat racist ideology running through. And just basically found it kind of offensive and was wondering what the point of the story was. And the politics of it are far too simple to justify the length. And also to justify the for lack of a better term, racist ideas in it. So that's the problem I had with it.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, I did also. I mean, it was pretty easy to see that they seemed to be Arab.
Yeah.
But, if you say anybody looks like them, if you suggest that some certain group of people look like monkeys or gorillas, it's usually not taken very well.
Well, it was the clothing and the stylings of it that just seemed so off, because they seemed to be pointing at a specific group of people with that. But if it weren't for that, and the idea of this one simian is sneaking off to drink some vodka, and he says, "This is an affront to my God, but fuck it, this is what I'm going to do." Again, pointing towards faith, Muslim faith, and I'm just not digging it on any level. And the other thing is, this story runs so long in issue 2 and issue 3. The first story was fine. Didn't need to be science fiction, but hey, he's running on the Dropship 15 thing, so okay, let's leave it there. It was kind of interesting, the mind over matter thing, and it was a good way to introduce that character, Lee. That was cool. I like that. Yeah. The second story with the orangutan that can find gold, it was kind of cute, but had it had the feel of a very, very, very short idea.
Yeah, I noticed that one was written by someone else, Darren Koziel.
it felt a little bit longer than it needed to be
Hmm.
for the idea itself. But then we get into the
The obscene threat story.
obscene threat, and then Tar Pits of Doom. In Tar Pits of Doom, you said it's kind of out of left field and has a lot of TNA and a lot of violence.
Mm-hmm.
But hold on those bad words.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the story didn't bug me as much. It was just kind of like, what's all this then? And I couldn't quite. The story, the world needed to be set up a little bit more. It's not one of those things where you can kind of just like Star Wars. They don't really explain the world in that first movie. They just kind of like, okay, there you go. But everything is kind of, well, you're in space, so space creatures, and it's science fiction, so flying ships and laser swords.
Yeah.
But this one is just like, okay, it's Earth, or maybe it's not. They've got kind of dragon horses with scales, but everybody's human, but maybe they got weird, kind of a weird culture. Yeah, and so it's real unclear. For the third issue, the first one was kind of cute, but again, a little bit long. What was it called? Fresh Meat?
Yeah, that's another Dropship 15 story.
Yeah, and it's told almost entirely in flashback, and I can't quite understand why it was a flashback. It seemed a little bit like it didn't need to be.
Yeah, so there's kind of a framing sequence to it, but I think, yeah, you could probably just have gotten rid of that first page and a half and just go straight into the story of him being recruited, and then still just keep that last panel that happens later. Yeah, I see what you mean. It didn't really need the framing sequence.
Yeah, it could be that he wanted to introduce it that way because he had already introduced the characters that are in it. And
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Remember that time when you bumped your head, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, but Juby, he was in the previous issue also.
Yeah. And then comes the rules of engagement, which I thought was kind of curious as a character arc for one of the protagonists, but for the simians, there's really nothing to it. And again, it still has those racist vibes, even though the monkeys are all now green.
Mm-hmm. I felt like the story was meant to be about kind of ethics of war, or saying something about how soldiers have to consider who to shoot at and who not to shoot at, and because there's a lot of arguing about the rules of engagement are don't shoot first, and because there could be kids there. And the other guy is saying, screw the rules of engagement. They're all going to try to shoot at us, including the kids. So there's tension on that issue. And I felt like that was sort of the main idea of the story. I agree that it was too long for that being the main point, because I don't think it needed to be that long just to talk about that one point. It goes on and on as I'm scrolling through it.
Yeah. Well, there are only two stories here.
Yeah, that's right. This issue just has two stories. Yeah,
the first one is about 5 pages, and the next one is the rest of the book.
Yeah.
It's a 36-page book, so it runs around 28 pages. So he is trying to kind of world build and kind of build up the characters and the different things that they do with each other when they're off duty. And I understand the need for it, but I just don't think that the rest of the story merits all of that. And there's no point where the dynamics that are set up in the beginning of the story pay off at the end, because essentially the two characters that have the biggest point of contention of the protagonists don't really have a scene together before they suit up and get ready to go. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about Fatty and Snake. And in fact, they don't even appear in the beginning of the story.
I think they were in the previous issue.
They were. Yeah, they were. But not until they're above Mars in the dropship getting ready to go. That's when they're kind of introduced into the story. There are a few bits of setup, and then they go into the story, and that's when it just suddenly ratchets up that tension for those characters. But it's not introduced in the beginning. There is no payoff there. I mean, if you look at, for example, and here we go with the movies again, the movie Aliens by James Cameron. In that, there's a scene where they get Bishop to do the thing. It's basically he takes this knife and starts darting it between his fingers. And they kind of clown around, and you get to kind of see some of the characteristics of some of the groups. But from that, he slices his finger just a tad bit and draws blood. His blood is white, and that's when Ripley notices that he is not human. He is an android. And she's like, what the fuck is this? I'm not going to work with an android. It became an issue of trust, which was resolved later in the film. And it was actually quite a nice setup for a very nice payoff in the film. Here, there is no such thing. You have the payoff without the setup, or at least not a payoff, but they ratchet up the tension, and it remains unresolved by the end of the issue. And maybe they'll resolve it in the next issue, but here it feels a little bit like a missed opportunity. Like he didn't know what he had until he was actually drawing the page or working on that section of the book. Didn't go back and fix that stuff. So it feels a little bit like a missed opportunity. But again, the main issue that I have with this is the racism of it.
Now, this woman that they call Fatty, is she Muslim? She's wearing like a scarf on her head under her helmet.
Yeah. I thought that was curious, but it doesn't excuse the other stuff. It doesn't make up for the simians. And I thought maybe there was an attempt to tone down some of that stuff. Although Fatima was in the previous story, I didn't really feel any kind of she's Muslim too, so it's okay. These are just different race wearing similar clothes but not Muslims. Like because nothing except her clothing indicates that. With the simians, there seems to be this whole religious, political, ideological point to it that puts them in direct opposition to the protagonists. And it just seems kind of too much. If he had drawn monkeys that wore spacesuits, that wore similar spacesuits to the protagonists, and the only way to tell the difference was that those were monkeys and these were humans, then it's not that. It's not that racist thing. But the fact that he gave them Middle Eastern daggers, kind of rules about alcohol, and a lot of Muslim beards just makes me say no.
did you notice anything about like the art or the storytelling? I had one like really minor thing on that score. In issue 2 on page 14. So you see a character coming. It's Lieutenant Spain, who is seen like far off in the distance. Then in the next panel, you see the back of the character, and the character has very short hair and is, in military uniform and saluting someone whose face we can see.
Yeah.
And I, just kind of reading through it, I assumed that the person whose back we were seeing was male.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I looked really closely, I would have seen an earring and looks like long eyelashes. But I just, in kind of zooming through it, I thought, oh, there's a guy. And the next panel is being referred to as she, which threw me off as I was reading it. So I didn't understand why he had the character walk through and never show her face. Mm-hmm. I thought that would have been nice to have be able to see the character's face once in that scene. We do see her in the next row of panels in the next scene, but it just was a little. I kind of tripped over that, but
yeah, no, I understand what you mean, but I think it's the momentum of this 9-panel page. It moves at a very fast pace and gets through a lot of story in a short amount of time, and has a lot of dialogue, and so it's a little rough cut sometimes. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think that you're right. It could have used something a little bit, maybe if not another panel, then a different angle. But yeah, it is kind of hard to kind of get all that information in with this art style, because it's not so fine. So pulling back and allowing all the other characters in, you lose so much detail that it gets a little tricky. Mm-hmm. I mean, I do understand. I don't think this is a perfect setup of that character for that scene, but I'm not sure that the artist could have done much better given the circumstance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lot of small It's kind of like a Watchmen page.
Yeah, very much grid. So. Yeah. But I mean, was it Dave Gibbons?
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very detailed in that. And so he would do a lot of hard work, heavy lifting to make sure that all that stuff kind of came through. I don't think this artist is quite at that level of detail, and maybe doesn't have that level of experience. Dave Gibbons is like 80 years old, isn't he?
By now, I would imagine so, Oh. I mean, Watchmen's been, going on 35 years ago.
Yeah, but he's executive producer on... Executive? No, he's producer on the Watchmen TV show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I've got a bit to say about that at the end, so remind me.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, at one point I did want to make about between issue 2 and issue 3. Issue 3 seems to be a little bit more confident in its coloring, which I felt was a little bit better than issue 2. Some points were a little bit hot with some of the red panels, but for the most part, it seemed to be a little more together.
Yeah, the colors are brighter for sure.
Yeah, in issue 3.
In issue 3.
Yeah. Yeah, they are brighter, but if we look in issue 2, there are especially for the Drop Shift 15 story.
It's hard to say, isn't it?
Yeah, Obscene Threat. For Obscene Threat, when they get to Mars, outside everything is red and inside everything is green, and that there wasn't too much subtlety in that. It was actually very when you're reading the comic, it doesn't bug you so much. But if you think about it, there's no subtlety in the coloring here. Whereas in the third issue, everything is kind of green based, but not everything is just flat green.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more. The details have different colors, which it was a little bit better. But yeah, the colors are a little bit more Dick Tracy in this one.
Yeah, like a newspaper strip.
Yeah.
I don't see any credit, so I assume that he's coloring as well. I think he says in that note at the beginning of issue 3 that it's a one-man show, so
yeah,
it's all his own coloring, I guess.
Yeah, coloring, I think, stepped up. Although some of the panels do need a little bit more subtlety. You're right; the colors are a bit bright.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he'll work it out in an issue or two, and he'll have a much more well-colored comic.
Yeah,
it's not bad though.
Mm-hmm.
Artistically, it's all fine. I think in issue 1, with the stuff that took place in the future, it didn't really have that science fiction feel. I think he's actually getting a little bit better at that in these books.
Mm-hmm.
There seems to be more of an eye for mechanical things in these books than there was in the first issue. Mm-hmm. Perhaps the color helps a bit, but my positives for these issues are right there.
Okay.
Welcome to the Superman Fan Podcast. My name is Billy Hogan, and I will be your host. Before we begin our journey through the time barrier, please ensure that your red indestructible capes are securely fastened around your necks so that we may all travel safely into the past to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel in the pages of Action Comics, Superman, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane, and World's Finest Comics. After we return from our journey, I encourage you to go to the website, thesupermanfanpodcast.blogspot.com. I look forward to have you join me each week to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel.
So, of course, recently my brother was here, and the three of us got together for lunch and to record our review of Black Panther. And when we were together, you mentioned that you were stuck with a closet full of copies of your books that didn't sell at conventions. You did sell some at conventions, but not all of them.
Yeah.
And so you were interested in trying harder to get a publisher interested in your work.
Yeah, definitely.
Which I can certainly understand. And to me, I mean, I think it sounds like maybe a good idea, but at the same time, you know, as a listener of the Comic Lab podcast, I was immediately reminded of how Brad and Dave have sworn up and down that they're making more money doing what they're doing than if they had publishing deals. Mm-hmm. But I was thinking, so what's the difference between their careers and your careers? Well, they've been, you know, putting comics on the web consistently for like 20 years now. Mm-hmm. And now I've been doing the podcast, you know, we've been doing the podcast for quite a few years, and I don't know how they've built up so much more of a fan base than we have, but enough that, you know, they can make a good chunk of their income on Patreon, you know, quit their day jobs quite some time ago. And they sell books online and don't even go to that many conventions anymore. Yeah. But it takes a lot of time to build up to that point. And Dave has talked about still having some boxes of certain books in the garage.
Yeah.
So, they're not immune from that problem. So I'm not saying that you should try to do what they're doing, but I couldn't help thinking about that sort of contrast. Do you have any thoughts about that?
You mean the idea of putting my comics online, or just the difference between my career and theirs?
Yeah, your career and theirs. I mean, I know you have done webcomics on occasion, I think, haven't you? Wasn't MindGator online at some point?
Yeah, MindGator was online, and I think you can. I don't know if it's still up anymore. I think I might have taken it down, but one episode of Yakai is also online, but I haven't. MindGator was kind of an experiment to see if I could do a weekly comic, and I did it for a year. And after a year of constantly putting up work, and some of it was really nicely drawn, and I was kind of proud of what I achieved, even though the story went off the rails. I had to junk about half of it and then make a new story when it came time to print it. No, it a lot happened behind the scenes, but I was actually quite satisfied with what I had made, and how the story developed. Because for the most part, it was just, okay, what am I going to talk about this week, or how am I going to progress the story? Which was exciting, but also, now that I think about it, a really dumb way to do a series comic. But also Elvis started as an online comic. That's why it feels a little bit episodic until about halfway through, and then it just suddenly zip to the end and ties up. But I would love to do a regular comic. And like a weekly thing, or some kind of strip. I don't necessarily want to write it and draw it and then hope that they will come at the moment. So I would say right now my life is kind of focused on getting other people to sell my work rather than for me to sell it. I don't know if it's going to work. I'm kind of flying blind with that sort of thing. But currently, I'm writing, I'm drawing. I'm writing and drawing my own stuff. I'm drawing other people's comics, which is why you haven't seen me on Instagram or Twitter so much, other than the occasional retweet. But I think I need to, for the next year, try to find either a publisher or an agent. And I've got someone helping me look for that. I've got a couple people helping me look for either a publisher or an agent. And I've got about 4 pitches ready to go. Well, I should say I've got actually 3 ready to go and 1 that I'm working on now. And so once I kind of understand what that's about and whether that's actually viable, then I'll kind of reassess. If it comes to the point where it's like, no, man, your comics are whack, and we don't want to invest in your books. It's like, okay, well then maybe I'll just make stuff online and sell that way, and try to find the people who would like my stuff. But there's a lot of work there that I've been very tired of doing for a while. So I don't know. It's not exactly frustration with the doing of the job, or the fans that I make from any project. It's more just the energy output.
Yeah,
is a bit rough. I'm getting old.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I'm as old as what are the names?
Brad and
Brad
Dave.
Geiger?
Yeah, Brad Geiger and Dave Kellett.
Because they're like in their 80s, right?
They're younger than I am.
Oh, really?
I can't remember exactly how old. I think they're probably in their 40s.
See, these whippersnappers and their young ways. Just leaving us old timers in the dust. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm kind of open to a lot of different ideas. There was something I was trying for a couple of years, which was like, going out, selling my stuff at conventions and pushing myself forward that way, trying to kind of find some footing somewhere, but kind of realized that no, I need the backing of a publisher. I'm just not that good at the internet sales and promoting and pushing my comic forward like that. I need to take a chunk of time, write my story at my own pace. When it's all done, edited, fixed, finished, then put it out. But it's kind of like a graphic novel way of working, which means you won't see me for 2 years and then suddenly, boom, there's a book.
Mm-hmm.
I'm much happier with that style of working.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know if that quite answers the question, but thank you for thinking of me.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
In a moment, Mulele's comments on the Watchmen TV show. First, don't forget that you can support this and all our podcasts by pledging a monthly donation at patreon.com/deconcomics. I'm continuing to republish classic episodes of Deconstructing Comics in reverse order, unlocked by our patrons' generous support. This week's classic episode from June 4th, 2007, features Mulele discussing his own experiences with the pros and cons of collaborating on a comic. The classic episodes can be found on our Facebook and Twitter feeds by clicking on the earliest months listed on the left sidebar at deconstructingcomics.com or in publicly available posts on our Patreon page. If you support us at any tier, you can receive these early episodes in an RSS feed in your podcast app. And if you join us on Patreon for $4 a month, you'll get access to all our episodes of Spider-Man 1963 and Tim Catches Up with the MCU. Last Saturday, we published our Black Panther discussion, where my brother Paul joined us. And we're planning a discussion of Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, for January 4th, before we come back and discuss the remaining 5 MCU movies. Check out all our goals and help us reach them at patreon.com/deconcomics. Now back to the show.
So just real quick, I wanted to just talk a little bit about Watchmen, the TV show.
Mm-hmm.
Have you watched any of this?
No.
So Tim doesn't watch The Watchmen. This is produced by David Lindelof. He's the writer, showrunner, executive producer, I guess. I don't know. But he wrote Lost. And I think he had some other projects that people didn't like too much. I think he did Prometheus, the Ridley Scott movie in the universe of Alien without actually having that exact same alien.
Mm-hmm.
And people complain about that film. They also complain about the ending of Lost and how it's not that satisfying, that the questions that were introduced were never answered. What is the black fog and why was there a polar bear? Well, actually, they did answer the polar bear. But how the island can move and stuff like this. There's a lot of different things. It's like at the end of the last episode, we're like, okay, but what the fuck was that? And I think for that reason, a lot of people don't trust his writing. And so watching this show, just I think 8 or 9 episodes, you're looking at this kind of very disjointed story for the first half of it. And there were some things that I thought were just, they went beyond just homage to Watchmen, or not homage, it was more than just a continuation of Watchmen. It seemed to kind of step on the toes of Watchmen. the comic book.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, this is a sequel to the comic, not a sequel to the movie.
Yeah.
Everybody who's read the comic or seen the movie, the endings are different, and so it basically focuses on the continuation from the end of the comic. And the last episode, I think, dropped last night, and I watched it this morning. And the story was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I would say I enjoyed it.
Okay.
But there is no way that this is Watchmen. Because Watchmen is the type of comic that makes you think about what a superhero actually is to the world that it inhabits versus what Batman or Superman are in their comics. They don't actually affect any change. And my recent feelings on what Batman is, won't get into that. But basically, once you read Watchmen, what's the point of these other superheroes?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know anymore. Why does Superman need to dress up? And I don't believe that the S on his chest means hope. That's just dumb. I mean, my name is Swahili, and it means a person who dreams or a person who flies. But I'm not going to wear that on my chest as a costume every time I do special things.
Where did this come from?
What is this?
What you're talking about, S meaning hope.
Oh, that's from the movie Man of Steel. The last one by Zack Snyder.
Okay.
There's a scene where Superman is being interviewed by Lois Lane, and she's like, "So why do you have an S on your chest? People call you Superman." He's like, "Oh, this is a symbol of my family. It means hope." It's like, yeah, right. I suppose, alien race doesn't have the same alphabet as modern America. Sure.
Yeah, well, I don't know if they said anything about it meaning hope, but it was the family crest in the 78, 77, the Christopher Reeve Superman.
Sure.
I remember
Sure,
that,
sure. I remember that with Marlon Brando having the S on his chest, and other people having kind of a variation of that. And I can kind of see the logic behind it, but I still think it's dumb.
Yeah, it is dumb. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, let's just say somebody. Well, it's the same kind of thing we've talked about with the Marvel movies, where they have to explain it in a way that isn't comic book logic. Where, in comic book logic, it's just you would just automatically end up with an S for Superman on your chest, and there's no question of who designed it or where it came from. But when they make these for a general audience, they feel like they have to explain it somehow, and I guess they don't want to have Superman just going to a design shop and hiring somebody to design a logo for him. They have to say that it came from his family on Krypton and blah blah blah. Even though that seems really unlikely that it would look like an S and he would be called Superman, which starts with an S. And wow, what a coincidence!
Yeah. So it gets to a lot of dumb when you think about it. If you're very much steeped in the lore and you're down for the fantasy of it, that's great. But after reading Watchmen, it's like, come on, no. And the fact that it kind of came to a head the way it did in that comic, that was beautiful. But yeah, Alan Moore kind of put the lid on superheroes for me, and this TV show does nothing like that. It's a different issue, and there's some interesting things, very interesting things that it does with its storytelling. But I don't think it really earns the name Watchmen. Seems to be. I read some guy tweeted, this show is missing two things, which is why it's not Watchmen. Number one, there's no Rorschach, and number two, there's no Alan Moore. So fuck this show. And part of me kind of felt that. But I must admit, it's pretty good. And although a lot of people on Twitter are saying, oh, better than the first season of The Wire, better than the first season of The Sopranos, slow the fuck down. No, it's not. It's all right. It's all right. And it's better than the first season of what the fuck was the name of that show? Better than the first season of Iron Fist.
Okay.
Better than the first season of Luke Cage. But it was not Watchmen level good. And I did see just one page from that Doomsday Clock thing, the I don't know, it's the second sequel to Watchmen from DC Comics, where it's just a page of Superman trying to punch the lights out of Dr. Manhattan. And I'm just thinking, what the fuck is this? And why would you, why? And who's asking for this? I don't know if that story's good, but again, just seeing that one page just made me feel junk. And so, no, I'm not digging it. An excellent story, sullied by its attempt to be something that it shouldn't, is basically my critique of it.
Yeah.
I'll leave it there.
Okay. Okay, so we don't have any comics in our queue, so it's a good time to send in your comic and have us critique it. You can send a PDF or a link to mail@deconstructingcomics.com, and we'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it on the show.
Or I could just, talk about more TV shows instead.
Or we could look up webcomics like we used to before people started sending us their comics.
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah. Anyway, any final thoughts?
Nothing in particular. This Friday, I'm going to see Star Wars. I have no idea whether it's good or bad. People are saying, whoa, this is going to be a conversation so far in the early reviews, but I haven't heard any spoilers yet, and I'm keeping it that way. I don't know. You have any thoughts on it?
Not really. I was just looking at my calendar tonight, trying to figure out when I can go. I'm thinking I'm going to go on the Christmas morning. And I'm hoping we can record a review for Patreon.
Well, I'm going with Oscar on Friday and Chris. And so Oscar, last time we saw Solo together, and we reviewed that for the Patreons. And when I watched Return of the Jedi. What was the last one? Sorry, I'm fucking dying here.
I can never remember either. Episode 2.
No,
episode. Oh, jeez, 8. Thank you. Yeah. My math is getting screwed up here. Yeah, episode 8, whatever it was called.
Yeah, when I watched with Oscar episode 8. For the next 2 hours afterwards, he ranted and raged about the entire affair. He hated it something fierce, but it was more of a cynical hate than an actual, it's bad for these reasons and kind of clinical analysis of it. But it was entertaining to watch. But at the end of it, I was just exhausted. It's like 2.5 hour shit movie, and then 2 hours of this man screaming about it. So maybe it'll be good for the podcast when we do review it for the Patreons.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so until next time, this is Tim.
And Mulele.
Thanks for listening to Critiquing Comics.
Next week we'll be off for the holidays. Happy New Year! In 2 weeks on Deconstructing Comics, Patrick will share his presentation about ghostly characters in the manga of Rumiko Takahashi. See you then!